In this example, we're going to multiply integers using a number line. So remember, the more different ways you have of representing something or visualizing something mathematically, the better off you are. So we saw an example that was like a number line in our first example when we were talking about accumulated distance. So here we have 3 times 5. You can think of that as you're maybe biking or traveling for 3 hours at 5 miles per hour, and we want to know the total distance that you traveled. Okay, so the 3 hours is going to be our 3 groups of distance that we're traveling, which is going to be 5 per hour. So we're going to have 3 groups of a distance of 5 miles. So that's going to be one way to think of this. So I'm going to think you're starting at home, or you start at point 0. Now we need 3 groups of 5, so I'm going to make jumps to 5. That's our first group of 5, our second, and our third. So this would be your ending result if you were traveling 5 miles an hour for 3 hours. Remember, we could also think of this as repeated addition. We have 5 plus another 5 plus another 5. You're accumulating that total 15 miles. So as a math equation, we would write 3 times 5 equals 15. Now let's look at the next one. We have negative 3 times 5. So this is a little bit more complicated to think of in terms of the 3 hours. We could think of going back 3 hours in time, but that will make things a little bit more complicated. So let's just think of this in the same type of context. So we're going to think of the opposite, just like we did with the chips, because it's hard to think of negative 3 groups or negative 3 time. So we're going to think of the opposite of 3 groups of 5. Okay, so let's see how we do this on the number line. So remember, we're going to start with the 3 groups of 5, and then at the end we take the opposite. So it's going to start just like this. We start at 0. We go to 5. That's 1 group of 5, 2 groups of 5, 3 groups of 5. Now I'm going to make our reflection lines. Remember how we did this in a previous lesson? We said taking the opposite on a number line is reflecting the number over the number line an equal distance to the number. So right now we're 15 away from 0. If we reflect this like a mirror, it would reflect to negative 15, since negative 15 is the same distance from 0 as positive 15. So this would be our final result. So negative 3 times 5 is equal to negative 15. Or the opposite of 3 groups of 5, the opposite of 15 is negative 15. Let's look at a few more. Now here we have 3 groups of negative 5. So since the number of groups are positive, that's easier for us to think of, but now we're going to use the number negative 5, so we're going to move in a negative distance, so to the left. So you could think maybe this may be up the street from your house, and this is down the street from your house, where 0 is your house, and instead of going this way, you go the other way, which we're going to call the negative direction. So you go 1 group of negative 5, 2 groups of negative 5, and then 3 groups of negative 5. So your end result is at negative 15. So 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Now here again, the number of groups, or the first number, has a negative value. So since it's hard to think of a negative group, negative 3 groups of negative 5, we are going to use the opposite again. The opposite of 3 groups of -5. So we're going to start with the 3 groups of -5, and notice that's just like the last example, and then after we find that, we're going to take the opposite. So, starting at 0, we take 3 groups of -5. That takes us to -15. Now we need to do our reflection. Here's our reflection line. So we can take the opposite. We want to go the same distance from 0 as -15 is from 0 on the other side. So I'm going to reflect, and that will take us to +15. So our math equation would be -3 times -5 equals +15. And notice these results correspond to the other results we found thus far about multiplication.